Well, hey, you guys, doing another Flickers of Fear. So, in my last movie review, which, if you remember, was Night of the Demon, aka Curse of the Demon from 1957, and I figured that since I had finally got around to seeing, that kind of iconic movie from the 1950s that I had previously been sleeping on, much to my shame, I decided that for this movie I was going to go continue along the same lines, I guess, and finally get around to seeing a movie also from the 1950s that gets brought up a lot, like in the horror community, even though it's not technically a horror movie, it's kind of more a thriller. But this was a movie that I just kept hearing about. And there's so many references to it, like in other movies and things like that. So I was like, I really need to get around to watching this. And this is the 1955 movie, The Night of the Hunter. And like I said, it's not really, I guess it has horror elements to it for sure, but it's kind of considered more like a noir thriller. But it really is kind of like horror adjacent. And I just feel like I had to get around to seeing it. So I finally did. Now, this movie was actually based on a novel by Davis Grubb. And the novel was actually inspired, and I actually didn't know this until I started researching this video, was that the novel was actually based on a real guy, a Dutch-born serial killer named Harry Powers, who later immigrated to the United States. And he was like this Lonely Hearts style killer. He would do the thing where he would like run personal ads, like, for marriage and stuff like that in newspapers, like he did back in the 1920s and 1930s. And he would target widows specifically. And then he would, try basically lure them into his web, kill them, and take all of their money. Now, they think that he murdered, I think he was convicted ultimately of 5 murders, but they think he maybe killed more than that, like maybe at least 2 more. And much like the fictional serial killer that you see in Night of the Hunter, he was actually eventually hanged for the murders, and he was hanged in Moundsville, West Virginia in the 1930s. Now, the movie adaptation, The Night of the Hunter, was actually directed by the actor Charles Laughton, who's, of course, very, very famous. He was also married to, the Bride of Frankenstein herself, Elsa Lanchester. And he had also, previous to this, directed a bunch of theater productions, was mostly his thing. Now, The Night of the Hunter, and this was another thing that I didn't know, this was his first film director's credit. Unfortunately, it was also his last one because the critical and audience reaction to The Night of the Hunter was so negative that he basically said, fuck it, I'm never, directing another film ever again, and he never did. So why was the reaction so negative, I wondered. Now, the source of the problem, and maybe there were other factors going on in this too, but the source seemed to be twofold, I feel like. On the one hand, religious audiences seemed like they were very, very offended by the fact that the villain of the movie was a nominal preacher. Even though it's made pretty clear, in the course of the story, that he's only posing as a preacher, he's not really a real, officially sanctioned one. Another thing, I think maybe to its detriment, at least from a critical and audience standpoint, was that Charles Laughton had wanted the movie to not look like a movie from the 1950s. He wanted to harken back to the old days of silent film. So the movie was a lot more stylized than audiences at the time were used to seeing, I guess. It definitely was heavily influenced by expressionism, and it was shot almost entirely on sound stages, even the exteriors, and it shows, but it's really kind of cool because, like I said, it gives it a look all its own. And it also kind of featured dialogue that was kind of maybe over dramatic or maybe unrealistic in a lot of ways, maybe overtly theatrical. So I guess all of these things combined kind of kept people away from seeing it, and contemporary critics also really didn't seem to get it either. But I will say that time has been very kind to this movie, and the movie is obviously now considered just a stone cold classic, and it shows up on a number of greatest American films of the 20th century lists, and pretty much anyone that you want to look at will have this on it. At least in my opinion, I think that because it had such controversial subject matter, at least for the time, and its sort of unusual stylistic, visual choices, I kind of feel like the movie seems a lot less dated than maybe other, beloved films from the 1950s. And when I was watching it, I admit that I was really surprised at how much the movie got away with for the 1950s. I mean, especially in regards to some kind of like sexual overtones, and also like some very, very real threats like perpetrated against children, which were like pretty fucked up and overt. So the story of The Night of the Hunter, it's set during the Great Depression. And so I feel like there's this whole like undercurrent of poverty and desperation, and it's really, which really kind of like adds to the horror and like the tragedy of the main narrative. So at the beginning of the movie, we meet the antagonist of the piece, who is a traveling reverend by the name of Harry Powell. And he's actually played by Robert Mitchum. And this is a great performance, very, very charismatic, and just like very sexually alluring, but also like very menacing. So it's just really, really, he's just a great character, like a great villain. Now, from the jump, we are under absolutely no illusions that this is a very, very bad man. Pretty much within the first 5 minutes, a group of little boys like find the body of a dead woman in a barn, and it's revealed that Harry has killed her, stolen her money and a car, and just kind of like taken off for the next town. Now, iconically, Harry has the letters of love and hate tattooed on his knuckles, like on his right and left hands. And this has been homaged in numerous other films and TV shows and stuff like that. So if you ever see somebody with like love and hate or like stuff on their tattooed on their knuckles, this is where it comes from. So Harry gets arrested for the car theft, though not for the murder. They didn't catch him for that. And he gets like thrown in the clink for 30 days, I think it was. Now, while all of that is going on over here, we're also following a family, the Harpers. Now, the dad, Ben Harper, who's actually played by Peter Graves, he's, it's the Depression, he's hurting for cash, and he doesn't really want his 2 kids going hungry. He just hates to see it. So he kind of, maybe unwisely, robs a bank and ends up killing 2 men in the process. I don't know if they were like people in the bank or if they were like his Confederates and he killed them so he could have all the money. It's not really clear. So he does that, and he's taken off. The cops are on his tail, though. But before he gets arrested, which he does, he hides the 10 grand that he stole. And the only person that he tells where it is his son, John, who looks like he's about 10, 11, something like that. Now, he makes John swear never, ever, ever tell anybody where this money is, not even your mom, and look after your younger sister, whose name is Pearl, and then he gets hauled away in handcuffs. Now, Ben, he gets sentenced to hang, but before he gets executed, he actually shares a cell with Harry Powell, who had gotten arrested earlier for the car theft. Now, Harry Powell has heard about this bank heist, and so he attempts to kind of like wangle the location of the money out of Ben because he knows that they never found the cash. Now, Ben will not tell him anything. But one night while he's asleep, he mumbles something like a Bible verse about like a little child shall lead them. And so Harry decides that after he gets out of jail, he's going to just, mosey on over and offer his condolences to Ben's widow, Willa, who's played by Shelley Winters, and hopefully find out like where all of that money might have gotten off to. So Harry Powell shows up in this town and just immediately, like I said, he's very charismatic. So he ends up like just charming the dungarees off everybody in this town with his, rugged good looks and charm and his real passionate religious speeches. One of which he does a couple of times, has to do with the right and left hand, like why he has those tattoos on his knuckles, like the love defeating hate, all that other kind of stuff, which is really ironic because he's a fucking serial killer, but you know what I mean. Now, Willa's boss at the ice cream shop where she works, whose name is Icy, which I guess, maybe that's not her real name, but they just named her that because she worked at an ice cream shop. But her name is Icy, and she's played by Evelyn Varden. And she is just immediately completely, she's an older lady, but she gets immediately like smitten with this mysterious reverend who's just blown into town. And she straight up encourages Willa, you need to get in there and jump on that dick before one of the other women in town like snaps it up. Like, you can't raise 2 kids on your own. Like, your husband just got hanged. You need to like move on with your life. And so Icy pretty much like shoves Willa at this dangerous serial killer. So, thanks for nothing, you fucking old bat. Now, the only person in town, it seems, who isn't fooled by Harry's very godly veneer is John, the son, who immediately knows that there is something intensely sketchy about this motherfucker and correctly deduces that he's just looking for the money that his dad stole and hid. Now, despite his obvious hatred for this dude, his mom pretty much almost instantly, like within minutes, like marries him. And this is a decision which will, spoiler alert for a very, very old movie, end up costing her life. So it's their wedding night. Harry implies that Willa is a whore. He doesn't, like, say it outright, but he, like, dances around it, you know what I mean? And he tells her also, in no uncertain terms, that they will not be having sex ever because sex is only for procreation, and she already has 2 kids and she doesn't want any more, so there's going to be no banging, right? So let's just get that out of your slutty little head right now. Because Willa is so kind of like shocked by this, and she's kind of fucked up. I mean, it's only been like 5 minutes. It's like her husband got hanged pretty much. I mean, I don't know how long it was in like the universe of the movie, but it's like 5 minutes in the movie. So Willa decides, I guess, as sort of like a shield, like for her emotions or something. Oh, well, God told me that Harry married me in order to save my soul. So it's like, so it's fine. So it's good that we're not having sex. This is what the Lord wants. You know what I mean? So then she starts accompanying him on all his tent revivals that he's doing around the place and just starts belittling herself, like talking about how much of a whore she was. She doesn't use that word. Obviously it's the 1950s, but you know, that's the implication. And just kind of like praising the Lord along with everybody else. Not too long after this, though, she actually overhears Harry straight up threatening her daughter Pearl, who is little, she's like 5 or 6, to tell him where the money is. And even though you would think that this would snap Willa out of her very sad and bizarre fantasies that she's having about this dude saving her soul, it almost seems to make her like more resigned to her fate, I guess, because she basically just lays, there's a great scene, and like I said, you can tell this is very, very strongly influenced by expressionism because it's just like these stark shadows and like just the way the room looks, like the angles of the room and stuff like that looks very much like an old silent film like Nosferatu or something. And so she's basically just like laying there in bed, her and Harry are like kind of having an argument. He goes over there and straight up like smacks her across the face, and she just kind of lays there all beatific, like with the light shining on her, and then he slashes her throat, pretty much. I mean, they don't show that, but you know, you find out that's what happened later on. They just show him like doing the knife and stuff like that, and then it just cuts to something else. So then Harry, like, you know, kind of fastens the body to the family car and just pushes the whole shebang into the river. And afterward, he tells Icy and just the other townspeople that Willa, this wanton and faithless slut, she just up and took off in the middle of the night, probably to go bang some other dude somewhere. It's like, that's what he's talking about. It's like bad enough that he killed her, and then he's like posthumously like ruining her reputation. Like, he's the fucking worst. And honestly, like, he lays the grief on so thick, like that he's, oh my god, he's just so heartbroken that she's gone and I was gonna help her and all this other kind of crap. I mean, he's laying it on so thick that it's really obvious that he's bullshitting. But every single one of these like stupid old people, these clucking old biddies in town, they just like fucking lap it right up, because of course he's just a wonderful human being and she just didn't know what she had, and she just like took off. And I was just like, oh man. Just like, oh no, it was basically like that level, you know what I mean? So meanwhile, there is this local codger named Bertie Steptoe, and he's also friends with John, like he takes him fishing and stuff like that. Now, he ends up, during one of his fishing trips, seeing Willa's body, like, at the bottom of the river while he's out fishing. This visual actually is easily the creepiest of the movie. They have, like, the camera just, like, lingering on her body, like, you know, kind of trapped in this car, and, like, her hair is just kind of, like, swishing in the water, like, along with, like, the river reeds and stuff like that. It's actually, like, really grotesque and, like, really beautiful. And, like, even though the effect was done with a mannequin, like, the mannequin is actually realistic enough that the whole thing is like really unsettling. Like, because I wasn't sure. I was sure it was a mannequin because I was like, that can't be like Shelley Winters, like just being that still, like in the water. But it was so good that like Tom came in and he was like watching a little bit too. He's like, wait, is that really her? Like, is that a mannequin? That looks like a real person. So it's like they did a good job with that. But yeah, that's like a really creepy, like iconic scene from this movie. So Bertie, who is a nice, lovely man, but is also a drunk, he's actually afraid to go to the police because he thinks that he's going to get blamed for the murder. And he's like a little bit traumatized by finding it, you know? So instead, he does what a drunk do and just kind of like dives into the bottom of the bottle and like laments that he can't go to the police because he'll get blamed, like while he's talking to a picture of his dead wife. Meanwhile, again, John and Pearl are left alone now with Harry Powell. They don't know their mom is dead. They just think that she ran off. But John suspects is like, this motherfucker did something to her, but they don't know for sure. But nobody else in town like suspects Harry Powell of anything, which is really alarming. So Harry, just now that there's nobody around to like stop him, he pretty much straight up threatens like the kids, you better tell me where the money is, you know, or I'm gonna like fucking kill you or whatever. Because John is afraid that that Harry is gonna hurt Pearl, the little girl, John agrees, okay, I'll tell you where the shit is. But he lies about it because he's not dumb, you know what I mean? Now at this point, like for a long time, you don't actually know where the money is. But by this point in the movie, which is kind of about the 2/3 mark, you know that the movie is, or the money is actually like stuffed inside of this doll that Pearl has been carrying around like for the whole movie. But John tells Harry that it's underneath this stone in the basement. But once they're down there, like Harry finds out that, you know, obviously the money isn't under there. And he actually like... This was the scene that I was kind of like shocked. I was like, wow, this really went there. But yeah, so he like pushes John's like head down in this barrel or something, and he's just gonna like slit his throat like that because he lied to him and shit like that. I was like, holy crap. So it's 1955, y'all. It was pretty hardcore for that time. But actually John is able to get the upper hand. Like he ends up dropping this heavy shelf that has like all these like mason jars of stuff and like kind of drops it on the dude's head and like knocks him over for a second. And then he just grabs Pearl and like they just get the fuck out of there. Now they initially seek help at Birdie's place, but he's so hammered that he's like absolutely no help at all. So at this point, they're kind of forced to come up with a plan B. Now at this point, I think there's about a third of the movie remaining. It's not a super long movie or anything like that. I think it's about hour 40 minutes, hour 47 minutes, something like that. But at this point, like the movie changes gear a tad because the kids actually end up taking off in their dad's John boat. And all they have is the doll with the money in it and just the clothes on their backs. They don't have anything else. So they just kind of drift down the river for a while, every now and then stopping somewhere and getting an apple from somebody. Like it's the Depression, so a lot of people are just kind of like, well, I can only give you one potato. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of shit. Now, so they're kind of off trying to find some place to go. And meanwhile, Harry Powell stabs a gypsy, steals the guy's horse, and starts to hunt for the kids. Now, the kids eventually turn up at the house of this kind of like no-nonsense woman named Rachel Cooper, who's actually played by Lillian Gish. Now, this role was initially supposed to go to Elsa Lanchester, who's Charles Laughton's wife, obviously. But for whatever reason, she decided at the last minute she didn't really want to be in the movie, so she recommended they get Lillian Gish instead, so they did. Now, Rachel actually, like I said, it's the Depression. There's a lot of orphaned children, you know, a lot of runaways, stuff like that. So Rachel takes in stray children, like, into her house, and she, you know, very lovingly takes care of them and kind of, like, puts them to work. They pick peaches on her farm and stuff like that. So John and Pearl, at this point, very thankful to become the latest additions to her large brood. But it doesn't take too long before Harry Powell tracks them down. I mean, they couldn't go that far. It's only been like a day or two, and all they had was this little boat, and they didn't have any food or anything. So he shows up at Rachel's house and claims to be the children's dad. Now, Pearl runs right to him like a little fucking traitor. I mean, she's just like a little girl, so it's just kind of like, ooh, father figure. You know what I mean? She's not like thinking about it too hard, but I mean, still, I was like, you shitty little child. God damn it. He's terrible. He's a terrible person. What are you doing? But John is just like not having it. And he says to like Rachel, he's like, that's not my father. And like the way he says it, Rachel, for her, you know, in her defense, she just totally is like, oh, this kid is like, knows what's up, like what the deal is. So she knows that this quote unquote preacher is absolutely not to be trusted. And she goes and like runs his ass off with a shotgun. And I was like, God damn it. All right. She's like, you don't come back on here. And I'm just like, all right, we like this lady. But Harry is not going to give up the 10 grand that easily. I don't know. So he very menacingly like parks himself outside the house all night singing this hymn that he's been singing like throughout the whole movie, which is called Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, which is a real hymn, obviously. Just kind of keeping everybody in the house awake. Now, Rachel sits up all night like with the gun across her fucking knees, man. She's just like not letting it happen. But at one point, I guess like one of the other kids, like one of the other girls who's like a teenager, she comes in with a lamp and like she can't see out the window for a minute. And during this period, like Harry just kind of like melts into the shadows, and then he kind of like sneaks around to the side of the house and like busts in the house, right? Now, again, to her credit, Rachel, who is a badass, she just does not hesitate and she just blasts him. She's like, she doesn't give him a warning or nothing. She's like, blam. And I was like, all right, again, I really like this lady. Now, he isn't killed. I don't know if it's just birdshot or whatever. But he's wounded bad enough that he just goes hightailing it to the barn, like just screeching and howling. And then Rachel, this is so epic. She just very, very calmly like calls the police and she's like, hey, police, like, something is wounded in my barn. And I just like busted up laughing at that line read. It was just so great. And the way she called him a something, it's just, I don't know, the tone of her voice just like made me laugh really hard. So the cops come, and he's still wounded bad enough that he hasn't been able to run off. So they take him into custody. But because his arrest looks almost identical to the arrest of John's father, Ben, at the beginning of the movie. Like, the kid, when he sees it happen, like, they put the guy down on the ground and they're putting the cuffs on him and everything like that. So the kid kind of has, like, a PTSD flashback or, like, a nervous breakdown or something. And he starts, like, screaming for the police, don't take him, don't take him. And then he starts, like, beating the doll on the ground and, like, all the money comes out. And then at Harry Powell's trial, like, they put John on the stand, but he can't bring himself to testify against Harry. He just like sits there and won't answer any questions. Like, he's all fucking traumatized and stuff. Even though he now knows for certain that this man definitely killed his mom, and they imply that he might have killed as many as like 25 other women as well. I mean, the kid, he went through a lot, so I guess we got to cut him some slack. But still, I think that did kind of like infuriate me. I'm like, say something, kid, god damn it. But I guess they were trying, like, you know, that he was so traumatized that seeing it happen again, that he just like clammed up or whatever. And it turned out that his testimony was not really necessary anyway, because Harry is sentenced to hang, and, you know, good riddance. Although it does appear that the townsfolk, which are led by Icy, remember her, they're gonna fucking lynch the dude, right? Like, she gets a whole lynch mob going. They march through the streets carrying torches and, you know, shrieking for his blood like they're chasing Frankenstein's monster. It's like a whole deal. But they don't end up getting the guy. Like, they take Harry, like, into the car. And it's implied, although it's not shown, that Harry actually meets his end all official-like at the end of the hangman's rope. And it's the same hangman that hung Ben at the beginning, but he's like, oh, well, this time I'm gonna enjoy it because this guy really is a motherfucker. So, like I said, The Night of the Hunter, it really is kind of like a standout film for the 1950s. I mean, not only in just this real exaggerated kind of throwback to the silent era look to it, which is phenomenal, it's really beautiful, but also how grim the storyline is. Now, I did have a couple small issues with it. The acting performances of the kids were kind of uneven, especially like the little girl. I mean, child acting was really, I feel like, didn't get good until like much more recently. So you do see like a lot of, you know, there were some good child actor performances in the 1950s and in every era, but these kids were a little hit or miss, especially the little girl. So that was a thing. I didn't love how quick it was. You know, the lead up to Willa and Harry getting married, like, I thought that was went by too quickly. And also her deciding that she was going to be like, you know, convert to his cause or whatever. Like, I kind of feel like that should have been fleshed out a little bit more, because it was just kind of short shrift given to that. And also, I gotta say, there is a bewildering overabundance of people in this movie, like, singing hymns. There's a lot of singing in this. Like, I wouldn't call it a musical, but there are a lot of points where people are like singing and stuff like that, which I thought was kind of bizarre. But other than those like tiny nitpicks, this is a really, really compelling movie. You can see why a lot of people like talk about it, why it turns up on so many lists and stuff like that. I mean, the cinematography is just beautiful, very eerie, and it does have like a lot of genuine suspense, and the villain is actually very, very villainous, and you're just like, yeah, he's gonna fucking slit that kid's throat, you know what I mean? Which is fucked up, like, especially for the 1950s. And you know, I mean, Robert Mitchum is phenomenal in this. He's easily the best part of this movie. He's just, like I said, he comes across as so alluring and yet also, like, really, really obviously very dangerous and, like, super, super evil. I mean, he has, like, no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Now, the whole tone of this movie, and I don't think I'm the first person to notice this, but it comes across very much like a dark fairy tale is how it seems, because it's a little bit hyper real, you know what I mean? Like, it's not entirely realistic, so it's almost kind of like, it has a little bit of a stage play kind of feel to it as well. But I definitely do think that Charles Laughton was trying to make it like a fairy tale, like it was structured kind of like that. So I have to say that, I mean, anybody that has just even a passing interest with genre cinema from the 1950s probably needs to give this a look if they haven't seen it. It's such a cultural touchstone, and it's been referenced and homaged in like so many other media. Even if people don't recognize like where some of the references came from, a lot of things do come from this movie. Incidentally, there was a TV movie remake of The Night of the Hunter, which came out in 1991, and Richard Chamberlain was in it. I haven't seen it. I mean, I like Richard Chamberlain a lot, so I might get around to seeing that. I never hear anything about it, so I don't know if it was all that memorable. And also, starting in 2020, and I don't know if this is still an ongoing concern or not, but there have been rumors that Universal is planning to do like a modern era version, which I actually might be interested to see if it was done well. And, you know, a lot hinges on that, obviously. But, you know, as of this recording, which is, you know, June 24th, June 25th, I don't remember what day it is, of 2023, the classic 1955 version is actually available to watch over on Tubi. So if you haven't seen it, you can get over there and check it out for free. And that will do it for this Flickers of Fear. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to like, share, and comment, and all of that for the algorithm. And I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.